What's up, guys? Dylan from Digital Adventures here, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of making that classic Asteroids game based off the 70s or 80s arcade game. I'm not sure which decade it was, actually. So let's dive into it. We have a couple of things we're going to do today. We're going to create a laser sprite that the ship can shoot. We're going to code the lasers to kill the asteroids when they touch the asteroids. And we're going to code the asteroids to kill the ship when the asteroid clones collide with the ship. So actually, the first thing I'm going to do real quick, guys, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to make it so that my controls work for both the arrow keys and WASD, because my keyboard actually doesn't have arrow keys. I just knocked something over. So I can't really use arrow keys, so I'm going to really quick make it so that WASD works as well. So let's do this and this. Remember, you guys don't actually have to do this. I'm just doing this because I myself do not have arrow keys. So if it's right arrow or the D key, if it's left arrow or the A key, and if it's up arrow or W. Okay, so now my code's going to work if I use WASD or the arrow keys. Okay, cool. So the first thing we're going to do is create a laser sprite. We can probably just paint it ourselves. It's just going to be a straight red line, basically. So we're going to switch to the color red. Maybe make it a bit thicker. 10. And then, you know what, that's a little bit too thin. Let's do like 30. Now, obviously, that's pretty big. So number one, make sure it's centered. And number two, you can adjust the size to make sure it's not ridiculously huge. This size will probably work. So let's do that. Actually, it's size 33. All right, well, if it works, it works. Okay, so let's think about this. We need, when the player presses the space key is going to be our shoot laser button. We need the laser to spawn at the ship's location and point in the same direction that the ship is pointing in. So first off, let's make it so that when the space bar is pressed, we create a clone of the laser. So we're going to use our old friend when green flag clicked, forever loop, and an if block. And then we're going to say if key space pressed, then create clone of myself. Now we're actually going to hide the original, just like we did with the asteroids. We're going to hide the original laser, but we're going to show the clones. So let's grab a when I start as a clone block. And then first thing we're going to do is actually show the clone. Okay. Well, actually, before we even show it, we should probably send it to the spaceship, right? We want it to spawn at the ship's location. So let's go to motion and go to rocket ship. All right, now here's the problem. We need it to point in the same direction that the ship is pointing. The direction that the ship is pointing, Scratch keeps track of that with a built-in variable called direction, which you can find in the motion blocks. However, this direction block is in the rocket ship. It's not in the sprite. Well, it is, but this is keeping track of the laser's direction, not the spaceship's. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable that keeps track of the ship's direction. And this variable will be able to, well, our laser sprite will be able to access that variable. So let's create a variable called ship direction. And then in your rocket ship, let's do a when green flag clicked and a forever loop as per usual. And then in here, we're going to constantly set this variable, ship direction. We're going to set it to whatever the direction is of the ship. So go to your variables and grab a set variable block. And we're going to set ship direction to direction. Now that might seem kind of weird, but check this out. When I click the green flag now, notice how it's 90 up here? And when I turn, that number actually changes according to the direction that I'm facing, right? So you might want to uncheck this box just to make sure it's not blocking the screen. And then we're going to go to our laser sprite. We should probably name it. Always a good idea to name your sprites. And now we can use the point in direction block, but instead of saying a specific number like 90, we're actually going to put that variable we made. So we can just go to variables and replace 90 with ship direction. And you can actually test this right off the bat. If you press the space bar, you will see the laser show up. And look at that, it's pointing in whatever direction the ship is pointing. Okay, awesome. So obviously we have to make it move. And the way the laser is going to work for this game, you guys can do it differently if you want, but I'm going to make it so that my laser moves until it touches the edge. When it touches the edge, we're actually going to destroy the laser. So usually what we would do is something like this. We would do a repeat loop and then a move 10 steps. And maybe you could make this something like 20. And if you test it, it actually works pretty good. But like I said, I want these clones to delete themselves when they touch the edge. So we're going to use a repeat until block, which you'll find in control. Repeat until, and it's going to move, and we want it to move until it touches the edge, right? So we're actually going to go into sensing and grab a touching block and change it to touching edge. So now it will travel as long as it can. Well, it'll travel until it reaches the edge, and then it'll stop. However, we also want it to delete. So we're actually going to grab a delete this clone block and put it at the very bottom. So now they'll be deleting themselves as soon as they touch the edge. Okay, that's working pretty well. We're going to make it so that the asteroids, when they get hit by the laser, they die. So this is actually pretty easy to program. In your asteroid sprite, we basically just need to say if touching laser, delete this clone. So pretty basic. We're just going to grab one of these blocks. We want it to constantly check if it's touching the laser, so we use a forever loop. So if touching laser, then delete this clone. Oh, so this actually isn't going to work because I used when green flag clicked. We actually want to use when I start as a clone. Okay. And if you test that, the asteroid clones will delete themselves when they contact the laser. Okay, great. So the last thing we're going to do is make it so that when the rocket ship touches the asteroids, we die. So let's go to the rocket ship. When we die, we're actually going to like burst into flames. Our rocket ship is going to explode or burst into flames or something. So we need a costume for that. I'm going to delete all my other costumes here because I do not need them. And I'm actually going to duplicate rocket ship A, my first costume. So I now have two identical costumes. And what I like to do is I like to just draw kind of a flame effect, like it's exploding. So you can do whatever you want, but you can basically just draw, you know, a big explosion or fire or something. I like to use red and yellow, kind of a classic explosion effect. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it works. And you know what? Let's call this costume explosion. Okay, so in our rocket ship, we're going to say, if touching asteroid, switch costume to the exploding costume. Easy. Now let's do that real quick. When green flag clicked, forever. And then if touching asteroid, go into looks, and we're going to switch costume to explosion. Oh, it's already made for us right there. Okay, and if we test that, oh, you know what we got to do? At the beginning of the game, we got to switch the costume to, you know, the normal costume. So we're also going to put this block here. So now it should spawn as a normal rocket ship. And then when it touches an asteroid, we explode. Now, the game actually hasn't ended. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add a little pause with the, let's wait 2 seconds or like 1.5 seconds. And then we're just going to stop all for now. So it's going to be a 1 second pause and then the game ends. You know what? That's a little bit of a long pause. Let's just do 1 second. There's now a little pause between when he actually hits the asteroid and when he, well, when the game ends. So the way this is going to work in part 3, we're going to make it so that the asteroids actually split into 2 smaller asteroids when they get hit by a laser. So that part is actually going to be pretty difficult. It's going to involve some tricky code, but that's going to be in part 3, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed this part 2, and I'll see you next time for more Scratch coding. See you later.